It's wonderful to be here and to greet you. And it is even more wonderful, or equally wonderful, to talk about Sefer Shmuel. Because, as I see Anna shaking her head, we love Sefer Shmuel. We love Sefer Shmuel. I want you to know that when I was teaching in St. Louis, when I was teaching in a day school, then the teachers would actually fight about who got to teach Shmuel Aleph every year. Everybody wanted to teach Shmuel Aleph. Not so much Shmuel Bet, because Shmuel Bet is heavy. It's much heavier. Shmuel Aleph is really inspiring. It is beautiful. It's everybody loves to teach Shmuel Aleph. But Shmuel Bet has some challenges for us. And one of the challenges is what we're going to talk about today. And that is the Mashal that Natan HaNavi presented to David HaMelech right after the incident of BATSHEVA. I'm going to put my glasses on for a moment. Both hands. So, to remind you of the story, and I'm going to do a total pshat when I deal with the story of David and Bathsheba. I'm going to do a total pshat. I'm not going to make any value judgments, and I'm not going to go into medrash. We will analyze more when we get to the mashal, because that is our topic for today. So, on a very simple level, we read, when we get to Perek Yud Aleph in Shmuel Bet, we read an overwhelmingly disturbing story that is presented in a very matter-of-fact manner. David HaMelech, who at the time is at the height of his power, literally at the height of his power, it is roughly 30 years or a little bit less into his kingdom, and he's very secure in his position, accepted and admired by all of OUisrael, admired and feared by the nations around him, decided to leave his army fighting outside of the capital city of Bnei Ammon under the very of the general Ben Suriah. Whoop, is that me? Thank you. Let's see. Okay. We'll try. Maybe it was. Maybe that was what was going on. At any rate, he decided to leave the army under the leadership of his general, and he returned to Yerushalayim. While walking on the roof, he happens to see a woman bathing. She's quite beautiful, we are told. He makes inquiries. He sends a messenger and makes inquiries, and he's told that she is Bathsheva, Bat Eliam, the daughter of Eliam, and the Eshet, the wife of Uriah Hachiti. Nachon? Despite this information, he sends another messenger to call her. She comes, they have relations, she goes home. A short while later, she sends a message. You notice all the messages going back and forth. She sends a message to tell David that she is expecting, and he immediately sends a messenger to Yoav to send the husband Uriah Hachiti home. Uriah comes, stands before David, gives him a report about the battle, refuses to go home, refuses to clarify the situation between himself and Bathsheba in any way. And when David sends him back to battle, he sends him back with instructions. The instructions are to Yoav: allow Uriah to stand at the front of the heavy fighting and retreat, have the army retreat, leaving him there. And indeed, something like that happens, and Uriah is killed. David gets the message, and not only does he get the message, but the wife of Uriah, I want to read it to you. I did not put this on the source sheets. Sorry, everything else is on the source sheets. Vatishma eshet Uriah ki meit Uriah isha. The wife of Uriah heard that Uriah isha with a yud, her husband, her man, died. Vatispod al ba'ala. And she mourned for her husband. Vayavor ha'evel, vayishlach David, vayasfa el beito. And the Avel finished, and David sent a messenger and brought her gathered her into his house. Vatihilo leisha, and she became his wife. Vateled lo ben. And it seems as though everything is like finished. That's the end of the story. Everything is fine. Everything is taken care of. She comes into David's house. She gives birth to a son. And there is an addendum to the pasuk, but I stopped first. The addendum is Vayera hadavar asher asa David be'enei Hashem. And the thing that David did was bad in the eyes of Hashem. And I want you to look with me for a moment at source 2, not 1, we'll get back to 1, at source 2, which is a malbim on that Vayera hadavar be'enei Hashem, that it was bad, the thing was bad in the eyes of Hashem. The malbim tells us, Be'emet lo yada ish badavar. In truth, no man knew anything about the whole incident, about what had gone on. Rak Hashem hayodea ta'alumot. Rak Hashem, only HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who knows all secrets. V'hagam shelo chata, and even though, notice what the Malbim says, that he didn't sin, lo be'eshet ish, not with the sin of taking a married woman, v'lo b'mitat Uriah kanemar lamala, and not by the death of Uriah. In other words, the Malbim says, even though we have established through the eyes of Chazal that David was not guilty of the sin of taking another man's wife, nor of killing Uriah, b'chol zot, nevertheless, ra hadavar, nevertheless, this thing was not all clean. It was bad. Mitzad she'asa'a David Mashiach Elokei Yaakov, because this wasn't an ordinary person who was doing these things that we read about in Perek Yud Aleph, but it was accomplished by David, the anointed one of the God of Yaakov. V'hagam shelo haya ne'enash al zeh b'dinei adam. And according to the laws of humankind, in a typical Beit Din, he would not have been given punishment if the Beit Din really looked into the situation. We'll talk about that later. That's one of our side issues. Aval bat ra hadavar b'nei Hashem, but the thing was evil in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, ki lekacha derech gezel, because he took her disregarding the fact that she was known publicly as somebody else's wife. And Kamoshi Yava'er, as will be explained in the Perek that we are embarking on right now. So let's go back. Question? I know that you're asking a wonderful question, and I did know the answer at one time. Did everybody hear the question? The question was a very good question, and I should know the answer, and I can't remember. The question was, why does it say specifically Elokei Yaakov? And it has something to do with the fact, I don't remember. I don't remember. I didn't check that, but thank you very much. It is definitely something. We can all check on that question, and I'll write to Zamira, and Zamira will let you know. Yes? I don't want to go into that now, ladies, because that's not my topic, okay? I will talk about it very soon. David would not be punished by a Beit Din because there were many extending circumstances. Many, including the way a Beit Din works. And that is that I am going to talk about. The way a Beit Din, a regular court of law according to halacha, the way it works, has very strict rules, a Beit Din, and we are going to talk about it because it's part of our topic. So in a moment, we will go back to that question. The question of the Mashiach Elokei Yaakov, there is definitely a reason that Yaakov is singled out. There's no question. As I was reading it, I said, somebody's going to ask, and I can't remember. Did everybody hear that? That was a lovely answer. Thank you very much. If you didn't hear it, maybe Yaakov, how could he have married two sisters? In other words, there are all kinds of questions like that we can't judge. I don't think that was the answer that I should know, but I like it. It's a very nice answer. Okay, let's now turn back to the actual text. Perek Yud Bet, it is your source, number 1. And we have Vayishlach. I want you to know that people that look at individual words point out that the word Vayishlach, Shalach, the root Shin Lamed Chet, is used again and again in Perek Yud Aleph and here at the beginning of Perek Yud Bet. It's as though David sent, BATSHEVA sent, David sent again, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, now it's my turn. Now I am going to send. And he sends Natan El David. He sends Natan the Navi to David. Vayavo elav, he came to him. Vayomer lo, and he said to him, Shnei anashim hayu be'ir achat. He tells him a story. He comes in and he tells him a story. He comes before the king as though he is telling him a story for the king's judgment. He says there were two men who were in one city, Echad Ashir ve'echad Rash. One was wealthy and one was poverty-stricken. Rash is really very, very poor. La'ashira yatzon uvakar arbe ma'od. The wealthy man had a lot of sheep and cattle. V'larash ein kol. And the poor man had nothing. Ki im kivsa achat ketana. Except for one little sheep, asher kana, that he had purchased, vayichayeha, and he raised her. Vatigdal imo ve'im banav yachdav. And she grew up with him and his sons together. Mipito tochal, she ate of his bread. Umikoso tishtan, she drank of his cup. Uvecheko tishkav, and she lay in his bosom. Vatihilo kavat, and she was like a daughter to him. Vayavo helech, and a wanderer came. Laisha ashir, to the rich man. Vayachmo lakachat mitzono uvivkaro laasot laoreach habalo. Maze vayachmo. What does it mean, the word vayachmo? Pity? Okay, let's say pity meanwhile. For about a minute, we'll say pity. And he pitied, he didn't want to take from his own sheep and cattle to prepare for the guest, Habalo, who came to him. Vayikach et kivsat ha'ish harash. And so he took the sheep of that poor man, lasot la'ish haba elav, to make for the man who came to him. So first, I want to take up that word vayachmol. Even though I put that far ahead, I put that in source 7. Again, it's the Malbim. Those of you who don't know me, I will tell you my secret. I love the Malbim. Those of you who know me know that. I love the Malbim. The Malbim asks the questions that I always have. And so the Malbim is teaching us about that word, vayachmol. Vayachmol, which is, ki yesh hevdel bein ha'pa'alim hanirdafim, chet mem lamed, chamal, chet vav samach, chus, lachus, and rachem, resh, chet mem. The Malbim likes synonyms. He likes to analyze the difference between synonyms. It is a Malbim's contention that no two words in Tanakh mean exactly the same thing. So he tells us there's a difference between these verbs. K'moshe katavti b'mikra acheret. As I wrote with another pasuk, the Malbim wrote it several times. Every time, almost, that the word chemla is used, the Malbim has something to say about it. Sheharachamim lo yihiyu rak me'adam la'adam. Rachamim is only used about another human being, not about anything inanimate. When you say pity, rachamim is pity, then it can only be used about another human being. Shekatzra nafsho lerot ba'avdan eza adam o b'tzorato. When one man has pain inside his neshama, when he sees that another man is either suffering or in some kind of difficulty. That's rachamim. You have pity when you see that your fellow man is in bad circumstances. So you feel bad. The guy is poor. The guy has physical problems, whatever. V'hachemla v'hachusa timtza al kol davar. But chemla and chusa can also be on inanimate objects, not just on a human being. V'ha'evdel beinehem, so what's the difference between chemla and chusa? Shahachusa tiyeh mitzat tzarko el hadavar. When you say lachus, then it's because you have use out of it. When we say chusa na al avadecha, about a Kadosh Baruch Hu, have this verb chus, please understand that Kadosh Baruch Hu, that you can still have good use of me. If you let me live and leave me healthy, I might be able to do something good still. That's lachus. K'mo shechas adam al mamano v'kelav, or like a man doesn't want to lose his money. He doesn't want to spend his money altogether or his belongings because he wants to have use out of them. Kihem kinyano, because they're his property. V'hachemla, here we go, tihiyeh gam al davar she'ein lo to'elet mimenu, can be even on something that he won't get good use of, rak sheshofet b'sichlo, but he makes a mental, an intellectual decision, she'ein ra'ui lahashchit hadavar, that it doesn't pay to destroy this, v'kiyumo tov yoter, because it's better that it is allowed to live. You make an intellectual decision that this thing should be allowed to live. And so, chemla The man didn't have chemla. He didn't understand that this object, the kivsa of the man, the poor man, should be allowed to live, deserves to be allowed to live. So that's the chemla. It's pity not because there's a problem with the object, that's really pity, but because it needs to be allowed to live. When we get up every morning and we say, Modeh ani lefanecha, melech chai v'kayam, I am thanking you, O Kadosh Baruch Hu, O great living God, sheherazarta bi nishmati b'chemla. You return my soul with this thing called chemla, which we can say is pity, but it's really an intellectual thing. I'm saying, Kadosh Baruch Hu, think again, because even though I might not do the best thing today, I deserve to be given the chance. I deserve to live and be given the chance to do what I can possibly do today. So I'm thanking you for returning my soul. So first, when we say Al Asher Lo Chamal, the interesting thing that I learned from the Malbim about this is that it's an intellectual decision, Chemla. It is, you are mindful, you are thinking about what you're doing, and then notice that it's going to be used again by David. So what's really going on here? Why did Natan come with this story before David? So it's actually a little bit of a complicated question. We understand that he is bringing a mashal, a parable before him, right? And the idea is, why? And I want to go first to number 4. I'm going to skip around a little in my sources. Number 4, which is Metzudat David, on Shmuel Bet Perek Yud Bet, Shnei Anashim. He starts right away to explain what Natan is doing and why a little bit. Al ki ratza sheDavid ba'atzmo yifsok hadin al atzmo. Because what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted and what Natan was sent to do was to get David to make a decision about what this person deserved, to do a psak on himself without realizing that he's speaking about himself. In other words, he wanted David to make a judgment. We're going to come to that in a moment. He wanted David to make a judgment about this story. V'lozeh amar lo ki'ilu kovel lefanav al ha'avel hanasa ba'ir. And so he came to tell him this story as though he's complaining about something terrible that happened in the city. V'shahu yaseh mishpat. So that David should do judgment. Uchashay yifsok hadin, and when he will decide what this person deserves, oz yomar lo atah ha'ish, then he'll say to him, you're the man. Va'af ki harbe b'dvarim she'ein inyan lahem im dvar David, and even though, hirba dvarim, and even though he added a lot of words that had really nothing to do with the situation of David and BATSHEVA, ulam kavanato haita, his intention was la'alim biyoter, to hide it more, sheDavid lo yargish v'yishmor piv, so that David shouldn't understand that it's a parable, and that it's a parable about himself, and that he would then be very careful with the way he handles his reaction. I can't resist going into a side issue, but it has very much to do with the question that was asked in the back before about what would happen in a Beit Din. I can't see you, but you know who you are. There you are. And I want to go into a very interesting Rabbeinu Nissim, Rabbeinu Nissim is one of our great Talmudic scholars who lived in the late medieval, actually middle medieval era in Spain. Rabbeinu Nissim, 13th century Spain, a little bit after the Ramban. And he talks about the idea that we see it in Navi, but we don't really totally understand what's going on. And that is that there were really two court systems that existed among Am Yisrael at the time of the Melachim. There was the typical judge, there was a typical shoftim v'shotrim titein lecha b'chol gvulecha. The first mitzvah in Parshat Shoftim and Sefer Dvarim, the mitzvah of setting up a Beit Din in every city. But there was also justice that could be dispensed by the king. And I found it very interesting because Rabbeinu Nissim teaches us, source 3, Vashem yitbarach tziva sheyitmanu hashoftim lishpot hamishpat hatzodek ha'amiti. A real Beit Din has to go according to very specific rules and regulations, because it tells us in the Torah, v'shaftu mishpat tzedek. The Beit Din is commanded to produce justice. Justice. It's got to produce justice. Kusha amru, and he tells us, v'shaftu et ha'mishpat tzedek. Klomar, bolavaer hashoftim ha'ele le'eze davar yitmanu. Simply in the Torah, in Parshat Shoftim, the Torah comes to tell the shofet what he is supposed to do clearly, what his job is. Ubameh kocham gadol, and where is their great strength? V'amar shetachlit minuyim hu kedei lishpot et ha'am b'mishpat tzedek amiti ba'atzmo. And he says clearly that the job of the shofet is to produce a just decision. It has to be justice. Ve'ein yicholtam over biyoter mizeh. They have no other job. They are supposed to judge according to the rules that the Torah tells us and produce justice according to those rules. ומפני שהסידור המדיני לא ישולם בזה לבדו. And a society cannot be complete with only pure justice. Hishlim hakel tikuno b'mitzvat hamelech. HaKadosh Baruch Hu added to this the idea of mishpat hamelech. And I am going to go into it a little bit orally. You have the source before you. But please remember that in a court of law, if witnesses come, the witnesses have to have seen, first of all, you need 2 witnesses for any capital crime. Secondly, they have to have seen with their own eyes, and both of them have to bring the same report. And thirdly, the person has to be warned beforehand. So can you imagine this in a court? Somebody murders somebody. 2 witnesses saw it. They come to court and they say, oh yeah, we saw Jack Spratt murdering whatever his name is. And they say, oh, Jack Spratt, did you get hatra'ah? Did they warn? Did those witnesses come over to you and say, wait, don't kill him, because before we kill him, you must know that you can be taken to a Beit Din and you will get the death penalty? That's what I mean when I say hatra'ah, warning. And so what the Ran says, there's no way that this person would ever really get justice. But there was a secondary court system, so to speak, as long as we had a king. The job of the king was also to act as a shofet. And the king did not need all those rules and regulations. The king had his own justice system, which relied upon the position of the king and his personal moral behavior. In other words, the king is also supposed to be a morally superior person. He is supposed to be an intelligent person. He is supposed to be a person who can see all sides, and he is permitted to give a psak halacha. He's permitted to give a verdict on this. Esther.
Can he just say off with your head?
The king absolutely had the power to say off with his head. Actually, David, one of the things that is discussed, David could have said about Uriah, instead of sending him back to battle and having him killed, we'll see, instead of sending him back to battle, he could have said, kill him. He had the power to say, I don't like the way he's talking to me. He is talking like a mored b'malchut, which he was. He was talking like a rebel. He refused to obey what the king was telling him. He was not obeying the king. David had every right to say, off with his head. And why didn't he, my friends? Because David was thinking. And he said, if I say off with his head, and then I marry his wife, it's not going to look so good. That was a good statement. It's not going to look so good. So David was thinking, but he was a drop short-sighted. Yes?
I was going to say that this whole issue of the two justice systems reminds of the act.
Beautiful. Very, very beautiful. Question if nobody heard. Oh, David said, let everybody else retreat. What about those people who were told to retreat? I want you to know I can't do everything because they're going to send me away because the next speaker is going to come. However, I want you to know that Yoav does not do that. He does not tell the people to retreat. If you look at the story, and oh, my friends, please look at the story again and again. It's Navi. It's Tanakh. Look at the story. Yoav also is thinking on his feet. And Yoav says, I'm not going to tell people to retreat because then it'll be too obvious. And what happens in truth, what actually happens, is that there is exceedingly heavy fighting. They all try to retreat, but Uriah gets caught. So and that's really Hashem. We go back, that's from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, isn't it? Interesting. Very interesting. Nevertheless, what you did point us to is that there's something a little unsavory about David sending to Yoav and saying, tell people to retreat. It's just a little bit unsavory.
The only one that actually knows that is Yoav.
The only one that knows it is Yoav, Nachon. That's what we have, right? We have that nobody really knows the whole story. At any rate, let's try to understand the Mashal now, the Mashal itself on the Pshat level. What have we in this Mashal? Now we're going to go according to the order of my sources. Number 5, a Radak, a nice straight-thinking Radak, Shnei Anashim, HaMashal Hazeh Mavoar. This is the way we understand this Mashal. Ki David Hayah Ha'ashir, Shehayulo Nashim Rabot. Who is the wealthy man in the Mashal? David is the wealthy man because he has many wives. That's the Tzonu Bakar. V'Uriah Ha'ish Harash, and Uriah is the poor man. Shelo Haitalo Ela Ishto Zot. He only had this one wife. Umasha Amar Asher Kana, And why does it say that he purchased? Ki adam koneh et ishto. Marriage is a kinyan. Marriage is a kinyan. You acquire a wife. You acquire a wife. That's why there's a ketubah. It's the contract, yes?
Why doesn't anybody here mention that he had given her a get? That we all know that before they went to war, they had to give their wives a get. That's not mentioned.
It's not mentioned in the text, is it? The question was, why doesn't the text mention anything about his giving her a get? And that is one interesting thing where, how can I put it? The Torah is not slanting the story in any way. The Navi, is not slanting the story. It is telling us straight, this is what happened, and it's not going into any extenuating circumstances. It does not tell us that Uriah can be considered a mored v'malchut. It does not tell us that it was the minhag, actually it was the law of David's army to give their wives a get when they went to war, so that there would be no question about if they are an aguna or not. If the
Does that still happen? Is that still practiced today?
That today is not practiced as far as I know. It's not practiced as far as David's army did this. At any rate, a little bit more. So the Kinyan he actually did purchase. Umasha amar vatigdal imo ve'im banav yachdav amru ki banim hayu lo meisha acheret sheheta lo umeta. When it says he raised her and she grew up with his sons, he might have had another wife previously who died and left children that were of the same age as BATSHEVA. Vehelech va'oreach hu hayetzer. And the wanderer and the guest is the yetzer hara that comes to a man. Ki yetzer hara, Rabotenu Zichron Livracha, our rabbis, Darshu, who understood from this pasuk, Ki kain yetzer hara. This is the way the yetzer hara operates. Batchila hu domeh lehelech she'over al ish v'lo linimo. When a yetzer hara comes and sort of tries to convince you that you want something, at first it's like a wanderer that comes but doesn't stay with you. It's like a thought comes and you can send it away. It's a quick thought that comes into your mind. V'achar kach, but if you let it linger, domela oreach she'avar alish v'lonimo, then he becomes a guest. The man welcomes. Here you are again, yetzer hara. Here you are again. Come, stay over with me a little bit. V'achar kach domela bal habayit. And after that, he seems to be the owner of the house. Rotzeh lomar shemoshel al ha'ish. What he wants to say is it then is like the Baal Habayit who's in charge. It rules over the person completely. Ulefichach karo ish. And that's why it says vayaseh lo ish. He becomes the important person. That yetzer hara, that thought of wanting to see that woman, bring that woman, becomes the ruling thing. Leish haba elav. V'David lo hevin ki mashalhu. And David did not understand that it was a mashal. He didn't understand it. V'amar ki ben mavetu derech guzma. He said, and we're going to go into the psukim, David said, if you look at 6, Vayicharaf David ba'ish ma'od. And David got very angry at the man. Vayomer el Natan, and he said to Natan, Chai Hashem ki ben mavet ha'isho sezot. He said, I swear by God that this man deserves death. Ve'et ha'kivsa yishalem arba'atayim. And that sheep he should repay double for. If you steal a sheep, you pay 4 times, 4 sheep in return for one. He's saying double, 4 and 4. Why? Asher asa et hadavar hazeh, because he did this thing. Va'al asher lo chamal, there's that word again. And because he didn't have pity, or whatever you want to call chemla, he didn't understand that keves should not be taken very logically, belongs to somebody else. Even if there was a get, she was perceived as belonging to somebody else. Ki lo yitchayev adam mitam, back to the Radak, bavor gezela. It was an exaggeration because a man normally doesn't deserve death because of the gezela. However, he's saying ki ben mavetu because it is a ma'aseh mechoar. The Radak calls it an ugly, disgusting act that he did. Why do we say an ugly, disgusting act? We see David's reaction. He considers that's what a mashal is for. It's a disgusting act. A mashal, when used correctly, clarifies a situation that has murky aspects. David, when he heard the story, immediately saw the incorrectness of the actions of the man that he himself did not really understand. You might ask why. We know that Natan then tells David, you have it before you. I took too long, and I'm shortening a little bit, and I apologize to you. Natan says, you are the man who did this. You are the one who accomplished this. What you did was wrong. You yourself said so. And he then gives him the very, very harsh punishment that is meted out to David for almost the rest of Sefer Shmuel Bet. It is harsh. People who think that David got away with what he did are wrong. They're not looking at all that punishment, the terrible things that happened to him. Interestingly, we said we should ask the question, how come David is the greatest intellect. He is always thinking, why did he not understand the Mashal as referring to him? And the only way we could answer it is that David really knew that everything he did was somewhat improper, but he repressed it. He pushed it down. Nothing happened. Nobody found out. Everything seemed to go smoothly, but David was repressing, pushing down what had happened. David then becomes a model for tshuva for all generations, because we know immediately he says to Natan, Chatati Lashem, in those very big words. And kindly look with me at Tehillim Perek Nun Aleph Test. Lamnatseach Mizmor LeDavid Bavo Elav Natan HaNavi Kasher Ba'el BATSHEVA. It should give you goose pimples, my friends. This Mizmor is speaking about David's reactions to what has just happened. And he says, please forgive me. And forgive me so that I can teach the world, so that I can teach the entire world the consequences of hate. I can teach the world how I accept that which I deserve. And I can teach the world how to do tshuva. My friends, Mazel Tov on learning Nach Yomi. It is a wonderful thing that you're doing, a praiseworthy thing that you're doing. There is nothing like Nach, take it from me, to teach you about human behavior, to teach you the lessons that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to have, to understand the people that we meet in Tanakh, to understand their greatness, and to understand why Hashem chose the leaders that he did to give us all of these lessons. Excuse me for cutting short, but I sometimes do that. So, thank you for your attention. We have one question very quickly, and I'll get up because it's not fair to Zamira.